Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Sword Art Online light novel review. This one's going to be for volume 21, which is called Unital Ring 1. And here is the cover for anyone wondering here. So, pretty cool image of Kirito, Asuna, and Alice in this volume. Getting a little bit more technical here, it's obviously Kirito as he looks from right towards the end of the volume in his Unital Ring, kind of first set of armor, and then that is Asuna and Alice in their ALO gear. So, and that's explaining the sort of cover here. But yeah, Unital Ring, brand new arc. We're done with Alization, we're done with Moon Cradle, even though we probably shouldn't be done with Moon Cradle, because it definitely wasn't the most satisfying two-book arc. But we're in Unital Ring now. And it's a interesting one because as far as I'm aware, they're like maybe 3-4 volumes ahead of this, so they're on Unital Ring 4 or so. And from what I've seen, I don't really know a lot about this arc really at all. I went into this pretty blind. I just know that the general opinion on Unital Ring is that, like, okay, it's good, it's interesting, but like, where are they going with this? There's a lot of mystery, even still, I believe. But yeah, that's the way I feel kind of coming out of Volume 1, is that, yeah, the game changes quite a lot. I like the choice to use sort of multiple perspectives throughout the book, in that, yes, you get the grouping of Kirito, Asuna, and Alice paired together, but you also, surprisingly, and I like it, you get Lisbeth and Silica having at least a little section of the book to be the sort of focus characters before the groups come back together. And yeah, this book, I would say, is definitely... It's more like progressive than it is like, I think, any of the other arcs that we've had so far, in that it goes way more into the mechanics of this new game than pretty much we've ever had before. In that, you know, SAO, you know, the original arc, Aincrad, is pretty light on the mechanics unless you go into progressive. It's more or less the same for like ALO and GGO. They just give you a light general idea, this is how the mechanics work. This book, though, it's a survival game, so it's all about, you know, crafting, and there's a huge emphasis on crafting because they're like reset back to level 1. They basically don't have any equipment, and they have to start from the very beginning and just figure out where they are, because the game just randomly switches into being Unital Ring. And that's much of what the book is. It's mechanics, like we need to craft this now to, you know, fix the cabin. I'll explain some of this details a little bit later on. And there's character stuff that kind of comes out, and then of course you get the fun dynamics of like Kirito interacting with Asuna and Alice, but it's mainly just an introduction to the new situation here. So before I get into like super specifics on this, I want to say this video will have full spoilers for Unital Ring 1. So I won't be holding back pretty much at all. I'll just be going straight into all of the details about this book. So just be aware of that. If you want a sort of non-spoiler recommendation, as ever, I think it's a good high quality SAO book, and I definitely would recommend you guys read it. But we're here to talk about the details. So, what actually is going on? This book is set about a month after Alization, so not a lot of time has passed. They established that it is a few days until Asuna's birthday, and then once it's Asuna's birthday, it's a week until Kirito's birthday. So both of their birthdays are coming up. It's going to be Asuna's 19th birthday and Kirito's 18th birthday. So, you know, pretty cool stuff there that we know going into the future that those events are coming up. Just very significant that their, you know, their birthdays are quite close together, and, you know, Kirito is like wondering, oh, what should I get her? And they go into ALO, and it's revealed, of course, that Alice also is playing ALO. As you can see from the cover, she is a cat, kind of like Silica, because she wants to go down the sort of other path in ALO that Silica didn't go down, and become a dragoon rider. So she wants to have the sort of the big dragon and be more like an integrity knight. It hasn't happened yet, but, you know, she's still, you know, at this point pretty good at the game. So we get this situation where it's basically these three characters hanging out in Kirito and Asuna's log cabin, which is on floor 21 of New Aincrad, of course. That was the big ALO update that happened right at the end of the ALO arc, was Aincrad being the big update to that game. They established that they're in the mid-40s, I think, of floors in terms of how much of New Aincrad they've actually cleared. But all of a sudden, what happens is that the castle, New Aincrad, starts to drop out of the sky. And they're on floor 22 and they sense this, and the effect of this giant castle falling basically begins to tear Aincrad apart, including floor 22. And so they basically, a kind of island section of the map that includes the cabin kind of separates from the rest of New Aincrad. And they're left with this situation of like, they want to save the cabin because for Kirito and Asuna, it's this very important place to them, especially Asuna. And Alice, of course, helps them with this. So they end up sort of roughly managing to use their skills, their wings, of course, because they're in ALO, to use air resistance and so on to cushion the landing just a little bit. And they crash on the ground. And so this is the question of like, okay, the castle has just fallen into the ALO map. That's fine, isn't it? But all of a sudden something happens, and when they get up, they realize that, okay, the cabin is pretty badly damaged. It's on the verge of being, considered fully destroyed. But that the map has changed. It's clearly not ALO anymore. It is this new place. It takes them a while to even get the name of Unital Ring, but as we can see from one of the early pages in the book, we do get a map of the new area that the log cabin has crashed just up here in the corner. Lisbeth and co have sort of crashed here, and then most of the player population have crashed in or around the overall New Aincrad landing spot. But this world is interesting because, like as I said, it's a survival game. The situation is that they lose all of their equipment except their favored 2 weapons, I think it is, and their best skill from their previous account. So Kirito gets to keep one-handed sword skills and his main black sword and Excalibur. So he gets to keep those 2 things plus his main armor set that he has on. And they establish that, okay, there appears to be some sort of a grace period as the game transitions, that they're allowed to keep on their equipment for the first, hour or 2 after landing. But after that, they realize they're going to be in a situation where they're going to be level 1 with no equipment. But they will be able to, I suppose, level up eventually to use their old armor and equipment again if they wish to. So that's the kind of situation we're in. The funny thing that happens is that Kirito ends up taking off his equipment, and then he realizes that in doing that during the grace period, he can't put the armor back on. Whereas if you keep it on, you can still get the use out of it and the weapons until the grace period ends. So he's left basically naked, so running around in his underwear for the entirety of this book, basically, while Asuna and Alice keep on their armor for the most part until the grace period ends, and everyone suddenly loses the ability to keep on such high-powered equipment. That's the setup for how the sort of transition actually happens. Now, they're not trapped in this game, that's the thing. They realize that the menu that they can usually pop up doesn't pop up in the usual way. I think they have to do a circle or something like that to make it pop up. And they realize that, oh, the logout button is here, but there's a warning along with it, and the warning is basically make sure that when you log out, you are in a safe location. You are at risk if you log out in the middle of a dangerous situation. So obviously in the previous games when they logged out, for the most part, it was this situation where the avatar just basically kind of left the world. But here, they are still at risk, and much later on in the book, it takes until about the 80% way through the book to get the piece of information that if you die in this game, you can't ever log back into this game again. So that's an interesting twist on the whole idea of how do they make playing the game significant and important and make dying in the game significant without it just being a repeat of the SAO incident. And this is how they do it. This is what seems to be all of the games being unified. This doesn't just affect ALO. It's revealed when the characters do log out that this is affecting all of the Seed VMMO RPGs. So everything that's connected through the Seed sort of network has basically had their account transferred into Unital Ring, with the same sort of caveats that they keep some of their equipment, but most of it is gone. So that's kind of what's going on here. The big question is, who did this? Who activated this? And about the only clue is like one of the first pages in the book. Like we do open up with this. The first chapter is called Log 7, and it just covers this text chat back and forth between someone and Kayaba. Again, they don't actually list who is who, but it's clear from context that one of them is Kayaba, unless it's going to be some sort of a major twist. So the question is like, okay, either they will expand without order and eventually wither away, or they will proceed to the next step, to unification. And I don't know which it will be. And then the mysterious person says, unification? That might be actually, I'd rather not leave the rest of that statement in the log. I suppose I'll take a page from your book and watch what unfolds for a while. So this is the big sort of mystery of what's going on here. Who has properly activated this? Like, the Seed has been this really good, positive thing so far. It's led effectively from the start of the series to allyization happening and the birth of a character like Alice, being a artificial human, of course. Now what? Now they're unifying all the games, but to what end? And why are they basically locking players out of their account if they lose? Like, what's the aim in all of this? Because Kayaba has felt like a good character for the last while. You still question why he did exactly what he did back in the initial arc, but he's been more of a heroic character since then, helping Kirito, with the aim being that he admires and likes VR and wants it to be this big thing in the world. And we've seen that through the Metacuboid and now artificial humans and so on. Where exactly are we going with all of this? We don't really get an answer to it in this book, of course. That's going to be, I think, one of the mysteries, is that for volume after volume after volume, we are just going to get like really drip fed, just tiny little bits of information on why this happened. And the only other, I suppose, maybe clue, if you can even call it a clue, is that Silica and Lisbeth end up encountering some of the, quote-unquote natives of this new world, and they speak a different language that only Yui seems to be able to understand and respond to with. So she's able to speak this language because she is an AI. Yui, interestingly, as the game transitions, is actually a player in this one. So she has HP, SP, all the different bars that all the other people have, and it seems like right now she is just a normal player in all of this. So she is at risk. She's not just a navigation pixie anymore. So that's really cool, and you get to see a nice moment for Silica, protecting Yui when the first fight happens. She's really afraid now that she can potentially die, but Yui also likes the opportunity that she has in this game to be like her mother, like her father, and so on. So you can see that here. The way they do it is, you can see there's one of the people from the tribe that lives on this world, and you can see the way they do the dialogue for these characters. It's just that unique symbol there, and they describe it as to the characters who are speaking Japanese, it sounds like they're speaking in tones or something like that. So kind of computer language. Not really sure, but they seem to sort of kind of understand English or Japanese, of course, and they have some sense for what has happened. They're, I think, are aware that new Aincrad has fallen, but again, it's sort of tough to know how much they know, because a lot of this is presented to us through Yui translating it, and she is aware of some of the details there. But Yeah, by the end of the book, it seems like Yui either nothing is gained by her actually logging out. I don't know what the situation is there, but either way, she's stuck in the game. And by the end of the book, what they end up accomplishing is that the damaged Floor 22 cabin is repaired after large sequences of crafting materials to get the materials needed to repair the cabin. And now they have the cabin, and they can all go in there to log out because, once they're all in the same party, this is like their base basically where they can safely log in and out from, and Yui is acting as some level of protection. And then one of the other ways of protection is that Asuna ends up sort of inadvertently, but kind of purposefully as well, taming one of the monsters of this world. And now the monsters of the world seem just like animals with like a slight twist on them. There's an element of like they kind of think that some of them look like dinosaurs. One of them is a giant bear that has like a lightning kind of mane to it. That's one of the first kind of creatures they encounter and end up killing. And other than that, they describe, I think, wolves and scorpions are also in here. And just you can see from like the map that you can see like there's like a leopard here. There's a scorpion, rabbit down there, wolf here. It seems relatively normal. Like we're not getting the crazy like RPG style enemies, at least just yet. So that's quite interesting. They mention with regards to some of the other characters that like when they log out for the first time, Kirito brings Suguha in. So Lifa ends up joining about the third way into the book, and they bring her in because they basically established that the way they were when Kirito, Asuna, and Alice sort of fell out of the sky, they didn't have their weapons equipped. So if they tried to equip their weapons, they wouldn't be able to use them effectively, and they'd be stuck in the same situation Kirito was in when he took his armor off. So he basically just tells like Lifa to kind of, okay, when you come in here, don't remove any of your equipment. So they're able to make use of her coming in and being able to use her high-level sword for a while, and that's key to them being able to cut the wood that they find to the right level. And the crafting, they like I said, they go into quite a lot of depth in terms of they have to start off by making tools by hand. So they get some stone and they start smashing them together to make other types of stone. And they use the stone to make a knife. They use the knife to carve the bark off a tree they chop down. And then Lifa uses a sword skill on that barkless tree to create the planks of wood. So there's an element of a lot of the really simple stuff you sort of have to do by hand and show a level of like that you understand how actual crafting works. But then a lot of the more complicated stuff, the system just sort of does for you. So it's a nice mix of, leading to the characters needing to know, have some knowledge of how a lot of this stuff is actually made, but not restricting them from being able to progress just because they don't have that knowledge. There's still like information in the menus and so on, and very, pretty quickly, because Asuna is obviously very intelligent. She knows it's revealed here that she kind of has an interest in sort of furniture and how it's made, so she actually understands a lot of the theory of sort of like woodworking, and then Kirito is able to like execute it. He ends up making the kind of pottery equipment that Asuna and Alice end up using to make, vessels to keep the water, because it's a survival game. It's not just health and magic points. It's also thirst points and stamina points that they have as well. So as time goes on, they need to drink, and then their stamina is also a factor, and they all sort of interlink together. So that is an interesting thing, in that it creates this dynamic where food typically wasn't that much of an issue in any of the games previously, but now it is. Now this need that like they pretty much need to have water every like 2-3 hours. They need to create things that they can carry water around if they want to adventure around the place. And as is noted here, if they ever go into a dungeon, how much water are they going to need to bring in with them? Because they're used to going into like the dungeons with like three groups of, like 12 or whatever, and they're having like 40, 50 people in there. But if they're in there for like a whole day, you need like a whole vat of water to keep everyone at maximum power, basically. So it's a really unique setup, I think, like very different than everything else. In the progressive novels, they go quite heavy into like weapon upgrading, what stats they choose when they level up, the stats of their weapons that they choose to level up, and just certain mechanics, of course, like we've seen in SAO episodes. But no, this is full on. There's systems upon systems in terms of how this all works. And it's not entirely clear what exactly the end result necessarily is. About the only clue about the goal of this game comes when the grace period ends. When it ends, they get a voice that, it says here, it was a very strange voice, combining the youthfulness of a young girl with the thoughtful wisdom of a much older woman, but somehow it felt familiar to me, like I'd heard it before. And this is a quote here, the seeds bud, sprout stems and leaves, and join ends to form a circular gate. The visitors to this land, drained of hope, preserve your solitary life, withstand myriad trials, survive untold dangers, and to the first to reach the land revealed by the heavenly light, all shall be given. And it's noted, I think, a page or two later that Alice thinks that the voice might have been administrator. Now, they don't really go into it too much, and like Kirito's like, I guess that sort of sounds right, but they never go quite as far as to basically just be like, yes, it was administrator, but it sort of sounds like her, which makes sense with the administrator's backstory, that she lived much longer than you would think because she like reversed her aging, so it was a young voice, but with wisdom in what was said. But yeah, very interesting. Just like it's almost like a poem in a way. There's mysteries here: seeds budding, stems and leaves. There's like a circular gate. The visitors to this land are obviously the people from New Aincrad who fell out of the sky, withstand trials, survive, and be the first to reach the land revealed by the heavenly light. All shall be given. What is that? What is the end goal of like when you say you get all? What is it? Because the first group of, I suppose, human players, Kirito and co, meet, basically try to kill them off immediately because they feel that this game will have the ultimate reward at the end. If you are the last to survive in this world, that means you will be the first to get to the end of it. So by killing off other players, especially strong players like Kirito, it will help them potentially get all that will be given. So that is a motivation that is potentially going to drive some of the players in terms of this is where the PKing is going to come in here. That, again, if you die in the game, you can never log back in. Now, they're told that by this group just before they betray them, but I have to take that as being the case exactly. Because again, Kirito and co, once they get the armor, they end up killing a few of these people who betrayed them, and beyond it just being the usual thing of their sort of body eventually explodes and their equipment is left behind, there's no real sense that like it's permanent just in the moment, so they just know that from being told. My guess is that, I think from context you get that one of their friends was killed and they logged out and realized that that person couldn't log back in. Because again, that's the unique thing here. They're able to log out, get information, and then come back in. And that's where like they cover the idea of when they log out, they're looking at the wiki sites to find out what all the information is. Everyone is trying to gather as much information as possible. And so now they're in a situation where Asuna, I suppose, can feed a lot of that data into Yui and she can go through it and help them out, but she's also a player herself. So her progress is going to be very interesting to follow. In the author comments at the end, he does make mention of the fact that more than likely as the arc goes on, he will introduce the likes of Agil, Kikuoka, and Klein, who aren't really mentioned in this book all that much. There are two new characters introduced right towards the end. Let me just get to them. So the first girl Asuna meets at school when she's logged out, her name is Shikimi Kamura, and this is what she looks like right there. So she just transferred like the previous day. I don't really know what to make of her. She doesn't really say that much. She just says like, I transferred here today. I'm looking forward to getting to know you. She does approach Asuna that like, oh, are you Asuna Yuki, as if like she knows her. So I'm wondering what the full situation is there. And then Kirito is approached by Argo. So Argo finally gets transferred to the SAO's Survivor School, and she is, I suppose, also going to play a role here. So that's quite fun, because Argo doesn't really play much of a role in any of the mainline series, but she obviously is quite a decent focus in the progressive novels and some of the side stories. So that's actually a really cool reveal at the end. Again, Kawahara in the description notes that, you know, he did introduce two mysterious characters at the end. Not that Argo, I think, is particularly mysterious, but I guess the timing of her transfer coinciding with this maybe speaks to something. Not really sure, though. Anything else to talk about? Again, there's fun moments. Is there anything particularly great with regards to, like, say, shipping moments for Kirito and Asuna? No, you see them working together reasonably well, but you see Kirito and Alice working well. Alice and Asuna's relationship is actually quite good here. They don't really argue all that much here, and they seem to get on for the most part, and that's fine. So yeah, it's just maybe a little bit like you maybe would wish that there would be a little bit more focus on Kirito and Asuna interacting specifically. But the trio here, our main characters here, sort of interacting, is quite good. Again, at the very start of the book, you get the idea that they're hesitant, they're sort of restricted by wrath in terms of going into the underworld, in terms of where the book ended and the idea that they went in and they met the descendants of Ronier and T.S. They struggle to go back in with the idea that they don't want to like reveal themselves yet to the world, because Kirito and Asuna are basically considered like gods almost to the people, and after like a 30-year delay, they don't want to just return out of nowhere. And then they wonder like, okay, Alice is going to want to find Silica at some point, but she doesn't want to just, again, reintroduce herself into the world after so much time has passed. But then the question obviously arises, Unital Ring uniting all the games together, that includes Underworld, doesn't it? Which would mean that all of the inhabitants of Underworld are somewhere in this world, meaning that Selka is probably in this world somewhere as well. And that's quite interesting that, you know, they can use this new game as a way to sort of interact with characters from basically all of the other games. Xenon, they mention, is going to come into play later. That, of course, because they can log out, they can contact her. But they established that she has a GGO and an ALO account separately, but that their theory is that her GGO account will be the one to transfer over, which makes sense. And they're just wondering, like, when they're going to kind of meet up again. So they'll have a lot to explain to her about what's going on. With regards to leveling up and stuff like that, it works sort of partly like ALO, partly like SAO, where, you know, you do things and you get levels, kind of like Skyrim if you've ever played it. Just by doing things, your skill within those things comes up. There doesn't seem to be that much of a limitation, but Kirito does note that he's like a little bit concerned that most of his stat growths have been in crafting, because they only encounter enemies a couple of times in this book, and they have to spend most of their time doing crafting to survive. So he sees most of the stat points going up on that side of things, and less combat based. But that seems to be how the system works, where the abilities within the game are the things that increase your combat skills, whereas all the stats are more related to crafting type stuff. At one point they are chased by this bear, and it's way above their level because, of course, the house, the floor 22 cabin, went off course when it fell out of New Aincrad. And they basically come to the conclusion that they've crashed in a slightly higher level section of the game than, I guess, the new area, which would be right outside where the main body of New Aincrad crashed. So this bear that they encounter is way above their level. They can't really do much damage to it. Even with like Lifa having her proper sword. So they end up chasing it into the ruins of the house. And then they do this cool trick where the way they're able to defeat it is that Kirito gets on the kind of rafters of the house, like the beams that are supporting the roof. And he asks like, okay, everyone transfer all of your wood to one person and then trade it up to me. And so it's like 150 giant logs of wood. And he just materializes it all, and it falls from the roof onto the bear, and that's how he sort of, clever, but, a little bit, glitching the system almost, kills this high-level bear. So his level goes up from 1 to level 13, like, almost instantly. And there's just a brief discussion later on in the book about how he's considering where to assign his skill points. That he doesn't know what to unlock yet because he acknowledges that they're going to have to do this as a team. The classes work a little bit differently here. The skills don't quite look exactly the same. So can he fulfill the role he usually plays within the party? He's not sure yet because they haven't even figured out how magic works in this game or anything. So that, I suppose, is potentially something for the next book, is that I guess we'll cover them all discussing, okay, I'll put my skill points here, you put them there, and we'll work from there. So that all is, I think, pretty cool in terms of how it works. Anything else to mention? I don't really think so. I'll see if I can find the picture again. That's kind of one of the more fun parts of the book. Yeah. So when the grace period ends, all of the girls realize, okay, they can't keep their armor on because it's way too heavy compared to their level, so they're encumbered. So they have to basically be like, okay, Kirito, you leave the house for now. We'll get changed. And so Kirito kind of leaves and is like, okay, what are they going to get changed into? Like, I don't have any clothes. What are they going to do? So when he comes back in, it's just revealed that the three of them there have managed to craft themselves these dresses, and they're all identical. So they're all wearing the exact same clothing. And he's just like, oh, where's my clothing? And they're like, yeah, we only had enough to make clothes for ourselves. And then they're kind of like, we kind of look good here, all wearing the same thing. Can you take a picture of us? And then they quickly realize, oh, there doesn't seem to be like an in-game picture kind of function. So it's just a fun little moment there between them all, seeing all the girls kind of work together there. But yeah, by the end of the book, Kirito does get some armor. What happens is that Lisbeth and Silica's group, where they meet up with the tribe, end up going to where Kirito and co are. So as they're attacked by the player killing group towards the end and they're overwhelmed, that's when the tribe attacks. Lisbeth and Yui and Silica also attack. Lisbeth really cleverly realizes that, oh, they've set up some crafting stuff here. So her main skill that was brought over was her blacksmithing skill, but she hadn't been able to use it up to this point. And they had just made an anvil, so she goes to work on the anvil with some of the materials and makes Kirito his fine armor set and fine armor sword. And she gives them to Yui to sort of pass on to Kirito. So we get the reunion of Kirito, Asuna, and Yui as Yui passes over the equipment to Kirito. And you get a cool moment as suddenly the tides turn in the battle. Kirito, who had basically naked been doing reasonably well in the fight, is suddenly able to completely turn the tides just with a set of armor and his equipment. Suddenly he has a one-handed sword for the first time and is able to use his skills because he keeps his highest skill, of course. So that was really good to see. Very briefly, I suppose, on the Lisbeth and Silica section, they're obviously paired up together with Yui because they were doing some leveling at ALO when the incident happened and Aincrad fell out of the sky. And what happens is that they end up pretty quickly realizing, okay, they need to forge some equipment, and Yui figures out the whole grace period thing. So they keep their equipment on so they're not at a disadvantage. And when they encountered the tribe, they're the first people to encounter the sort of residents of this new world that they're in. And Yui sort of translates for them. They obviously are friendly at first. You know, they're like, okay, here's some food. We will offer to help you in exchange for, you know, trade or helping us. They want the use of the other worlders. I think they call Silica a fell, which is kind of interesting. And they just acknowledge, okay, we want to test your combat power. So it seems like they're setting up that Silica is going to have to fight the leader of this tribe, but it's actually just this test where she throws up a chunk of wood and has Silica test out her sword skill on it, which she is able to use with her knife. She cuts it up, and that is a large part of how later, when we come into play, because of you know, Lisbeth's skills, they're able to, you know, have decent equipment and come in and turn the tide of battle. So, you know, their section of the story isn't a lot, but I think in terms of this potentially being a final arc for SAO, I do really appreciate that it's not just all Kirito, all Asuna, all Alice Net. She's kind of a main character. There was at least a side plot involving Silica and Lisbeth, and Yui getting to stand out. Yui feels like there's going to be something quite significant with her over the course of this arc. And I guess once Sinon comes in, she'll get some focus. Lifa's obviously here now, so she'll get some focus. And he's already teased that some of the other characters are going to come into play as well. So I think that's pretty much everything I want to say. I talked about Asuna taming one of the animals, and their plan is they want to build a wall around the cabin and tame more animals to protect them as well. So Yui and some tamed animals are going to be the protection for when they have to log out and so on. Because they covered that, you know, they still have to go to, you know, school and stuff like that. They can't just devote all of their time to this game. So that's kind of interesting that we are going to get some logged out content in this book as well, which, you know, is more, it makes this feel more similar to sort of the middle arcs of the show rather than the first and then most recent arc of Alization, where it was, you're stuck in the game, that's it. There's still the threat of if you're killed, you can't log back in, which I'm guessing will happen to someone, and it'll be interesting to see how that works, because they're out, but the players who are still in can then log out and talk to them in the real world. So it's a kind of interesting dynamic in terms of, like, how does it work if you try and sign up for another account and go in again, or what? There's lots of questions, is I suppose the main thing. But yeah, Argo being reintroduced here, Sinon's coming back in, I guess, in the next book. Seems pretty exciting to me, so I'm pretty positive on this. I just hope that when this arc gets around to explaining its mysteries, it has good answers for those mysteries about who has caused this to happen. What is the aim of the unification being like this? Because on one hand, you could really, like, you think the way it should work based on Kayaba's previous actions is that he should have just maybe activated unification, and it's just a thing where all the worlds are merged, but there's no real negative impact. It's just how will the players all interact. But I suppose you kind of did have to do a thing where it all became the same game. But again, like, there's so many questions you have about why specifically this, and that riddle in the middle. What does it mean? What do you get if you survive? Because once the grace period ends, what ends up happening is a timer starts, but the timer's going up, not down. So it's not a count down to anything, and it doesn't appear to be a count up to anything, because the timer is like 0000, and then it's hours, minutes, seconds. So the limitation, if there was one, I guess, would be 9,999 days, which is like so many years that it's like that's not even a time limit, really. So what's the situation? That's what I want to know. Maybe it is that limit, I don't know, but that's the situation. So they're my thoughts on Volume 21. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.